You can't just stand there and act like this is okay. I'm not the one causing the problem here. Then do something about it.
Man in a rich suburb, justice hit back. The motion sensor lights blinked on one by one, cold and clinical, as Jamal Carter's sedan rolled through Maple Ridge at 11:47 p.m. His car was old but spotless, 15 years on the road, but the paint still held its shine. He drove slowly, deliberately, hands at 10 and 2. Behind tinted windows in million-dollar homes, curtains twitched. Security cameras pivoted silently, tracking his movement like a predator watching prey. Jamal didn't belong here. Not because he was doing anything wrong, he wasn't. But in neighborhoods like this, presence alone was evidence. He pulled up to the community center, a sprawling brick building that hosted yoga classes for stay-at-home moms and tennis lessons for their kids. Tonight, it was dark. Jamal killed the engine, grabbed his maintenance kit from the trunk, and walked toward the side entrance. His work boots made soft sounds on the pristine pavement. That's when Thomas Whitfield's Mercedes SUV turned the corner. Thomas was 53, silver-haired, and exceptionally proud of both. He wore a cashmere sweater, even in mild weather, just to remind people he could afford it. As chairman of the Maple Ridge Zoning and Oversight Board, he considered himself the neighborhood's guardian, its protector, its arbiter of standards. And right now, those standards were being violated. Thomas pulled up fast, his headlights flooding Jamal in white light. The door opened before the engine even cut off. "Excuse me." Thomas's voice carried that particular sharpness, polite on the surface, hostile underneath. "This is a restricted area." Jamal turned slowly, his expression neutral. "I'm contracted maintenance, here to check the HVAC system." "At midnight?" Thomas stepped closer, his phone already in his hand. "People like you don't usually work this late in neighborhoods like this." Jamal said nothing. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. "I'm going to need to see some ID," Thomas continued, scrolling through his contacts, "and proof of contract. And honestly, I think we should get the police involved. Just to be safe, you understand." It wasn't a question. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars arrived. Neighbors emerged onto porches, phones raised, recording. Not to protect Jamal, to document him, to have evidence, just in case. The officers were professional but firm, asking questions they already knew the answers to. Thomas stood back, arms crossed, satisfied. "You know," he said loudly, making sure the phones caught it, "this neighborhood has standards. We worked hard to build something safe here, something valuable, and we're not going to let it get destroyed by people who don't respect that." He looked directly at Jamal. "People who think they can just show up wherever they want." The officers checked Jamal's paperwork. Everything was legitimate. They handed it back. "You're free to go," one officer muttered, "but maybe finish up quick, yeah?" Jamal nodded once. He didn't say thank you. He'd learned that lesson too. Thomas smiled as Jamal walked back to his car. "See how easy that was? Cooperation. That's all we ask." He turned to the neighbors, projecting confidence. "This is why I do what I do. This is why I'll keep doing it for years to come. Because someone has to protect what we've built." Jamal started his engine. Through the rearview mirror, he watched Thomas standing there, illuminated by porch lights, phone still in hand, already texting someone about his victory. Jamal's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened just slightly on the steering wheel. Jamal Carter didn't talk much on the job. That was deliberate. He arrived at the municipal water treatment facility at 10 p.m. sharp, parked in the employee lot, and clocked in without small talk. The overnight supervisor barely looked up. Most contractors were loud, complaining about hours or pay. Jamal just nodded and got to work. His toolkit was immaculate, every wrench organized by size, every screwdriver labeled. His clipboard held maintenance logs dated back 3 months, each entry written in precise block letters. No shortcuts, no mistakes. "You're new, right?" A day shift worker passed him in the hallway, coffee in hand. Been here 6 weeks, Jamal replied evenly. Where were you before? Out of state. That was all he offered. The worker waited for more. Jamal didn't give it. During his break, Jamal sat alone in the break room. While other contractors scrolled social media, he pulled out a folder from his bag. Inside were photocopies of municipal code statutes, zoning regulations, civil procedure guidelines, dense legal text. He read them the way most people read novels carefully, absorbing every word. A younger contractor, Danny, glanced over. Man, what are you reading? That looks boring as hell. Just staying informed, Jamal said quietly, closing the folder. You a lawyer or something? Jamal's expression didn't change. Just a maintenance guy. But Danny noticed the way Jamal held himself, the posture, the measured words, the way his eyes tracked everything, exit signs, security cameras, who entered and left the room. This wasn't a man who stumbled into night shift work. This was a man who chose invisibility. You from around here originally? Danny pressed. Used to be, long time ago. What made you come back? Jamal looked at him directly. Unfinished business. He didn't elaborate. The thing about Jamal was this. He never complained, never argued, never pushed back. When the supervisor gave him the worst assignments crawling through flooded basements, cleaning chemical tanks, Jamal just did it. When coworkers made comments about quotas or diversity hires, he stayed silent. He'd learned that lesson in blood. Speaking up got you noticed. Being noticed got you targeted. Being targeted got you erased. So Jamal worked quietly, efficiently, kept his head down and his paperwork perfect. He showed up early, left late, and made himself indispensable in ways that didn't require words. But sometimes, late at night when the facility was empty, he'd pause, stand at the window overlooking the same city that chewed him up and spit him out 7 years ago, the same city that pretended he never existed. He wasn't here for revenge. Revenge was loud. Revenge got you killed. Jamal was here for something much more permanent. Justice. The kind that didn't announce itself. The kind that built cases brick by brick, document by document, until the weight became undeniable. He checked his watch. 2:47 a.m. Shift almost over. Jamal packed his tools with the same precision he'd unpacked them. Wiped down surfaces, left no trace. As he walked to his car, he passed a bulletin board. Posted notices about city council meetings, zoning board appointments. One name appeared repeatedly, Thomas Whitfield, chairman. Jamal stared at it for exactly 3 seconds, then kept walking. Thomas Whitfield believed in order. Not the cruel kind, he'd tell you that himself. The necessary kind. The kind that kept property values high and communities safe. The kind that required vigilance, standards, and people willing to make hard decisions. People like him. At 54, Thomas had built a reputation as Maple Ridge's moral compass. Chairman of the Zoning and Property Oversight Board for 11 years running, member of 3 homeowners associations, regular guest on the local morning news segment, Protecting Our Neighborhoods. His silver hair was always perfectly styled, his handshake firm, his smile warm until it needed to be something else. He drove through the industrial district at 11 p.m., returning from a city council dinner. These late drives were part of his routine. He called them community awareness patrols. Others might call them surveillance. Thomas preferred the former. That's when he saw it. An old sedan, parked outside the municipal maintenance depot. Nothing explicitly wrong with it. The car was legal. The parking spot, public. But Thomas had developed an instinct over the years. An ability to sense when something didn't fit. And that car didn't fit. He slowed down, pulling his Mercedes alongside it. Through the depot's chain-link fence, he could see a black man in work clothes, carrying tools toward a municipal truck. Thomas pulled out his phone, opening the neighborhood watch app he'd personally funded. He snapped a photo of the license plate, then another of the man. Just documentation. Just being thorough. The man noticed him, made brief eye contact, didn't wave, didn't explain himself. That bothered Thomas most of all, the lack of deference. He called his vice chair Patricia, despite the hour. She answered on the second ring. People always answered when Thomas called. Patricia, I need you to pull municipal contractor records. Anyone new working night shifts in our district. I'm seeing some irregular activity. Irregular how? Let's just say I'm noticing people in places they don't usually work. I want to make sure all proper protocols are being followed. Background checks, residency verification, the full spectrum. Of course, I'll have it by morning. Thomas watched the man load equipment into the truck. Everything appeared legitimate. That was the problem with modern regulations. Too many loopholes. Too much room for people to slip through cracks. We worked too hard to build something here, Thomas continued, his voice taking on that rehearsed quality he used in board meetings. We can't let standards slip just because it's uncomfortable to enforce them. Someone has to be willing to ask the tough questions. You're absolutely right, Patricia agreed. She always did. Thomas ended the call, still watching. The man finished loading, climbed into the municipal truck, and drove off without looking back. But Thomas memorized the face anyway. He learned something important over his years in leadership. Power wasn't about dramatic confrontations or angry speeches. Power was about paperwork, permits, compliance reviews, the quiet machinery of bureaucracy that could strangle someone without ever raising its voice. Thomas smiled to himself, already composing the email he'd send to the municipal director in the morning. Just a concerned citizen, just asking reasonable questions, just protecting his community. He put his Mercedes in drive and headed home, satisfied that he'd done his duty. Tomorrow, he'd do it again. 3 nights later, Thomas got his opportunity. Jamal's municipal truck was parked outside the community center on Oakwood Drive, right in the heart of Maple Ridge's wealthiest section. The work order was legitimate. Emergency repair on a busted water main. But Thomas didn't care about work orders. He cared about optics. Thomas pulled up fast, his Mercedes blocking the truck's exit. He left his headlights on, flooding Jamal in harsh white light. By the time he stepped out, 2 neighbors were already on their porches. Mrs. Chen from number 42, the Davidsons from the corner house. Perfect audience. Excuse me, Thomas's voice carried across the quiet street, loud enough for everyone to hear. This is a restricted work zone after 10 p.m. Jamal looked up from the access panel he'd been inspecting. His expression stayed neutral. I have authorization, emergency repair. I'm going to need to see that authorization. Thomas walked closer, phone already in hand. This area has specific protocols. People like you don't usually work this late in residential neighborhoods. People like you. Mrs. Chen pulled out her phone, started recording. Jamal reached slowly into his pocket, deliberately slow, hands visible, and pulled out his work order. He handed it over without a word. Thomas barely glanced at it. This doesn't specify after-hours access, and I don't see a residential zone permit. It's an emergency repair. Permit exemption is built into Municipal Code 7-43. The precision of Jamal's answer made Thomas's jaw tighten. I'm not interested in your interpretation of code. I'm interested in compliance. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling the police, just to be safe, you understand. It wasn't a question. Jamal said nothing. He knew the script, knew that words right now were weapons that would be used against him. So he stood still, hands at his sides, face empty of emotion. By the time the squad car arrived, 5 neighbors were outside, all recording, all watching, none asking if Jamal needed help. They were documenting him, evidence for later, proof that something suspicious had happened here. Officer Mills stepped out, hand resting casually near his belt. Evening, we got a call about unauthorized work. Thomas stepped forward immediately. Officer, thank you for coming. I'm Thomas Whitfield, Zoning Board Chairman. This individual claims to have authorization for after-hours work, but I have concerns about protocol compliance. Mills turned to Jamal. ID and work order. Jamal handed them over silently. Mills examined everything under his flashlight. The work order was perfect. The ID current. The truck registration clean. He handed them back. Everything checks out, Mills said. Thomas's smile didn't waver. I appreciate your thoroughness, officer, but I think we should document this incident. For the record, you know how these situations can escalate. Mills hesitated, then pulled out his notepad, started writing. Jamal stood there, under the lights, surrounded by cameras, while a police report was filed about him doing his job correctly. Thomas addressed the neighbors, voice full of concerned authority. This is exactly why we have oversight, why we stay vigilant, because standards matter, safety matters, and someone has to be willing to protect what we built here. Mrs. Chen nodded, still recording. The Davidsons went back inside, satisfied the threat had been handled. Jamal was released 20 minutes later with a warning to finish quickly and avoid residential areas when possible. As he packed his tools, Thomas called out one last time, "See how smooth things go when everyone cooperates?" Jamal didn't respond, but his hands, normally so steady, trembled just slightly as he closed the truck door. The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. Jamal was still in his work clothes, sitting at his kitchen table, when his phone buzzed. The subject line was professional, cold, contract suspension, pending review. He opened it. Dear Mr. Carter, due to recent concerns regarding protocol compliance and community relations, your maintenance contract is hereby suspended pending internal review. Please return all municipal property and credentials by end of business today. This suspension is precautionary and does not constitute an admission of wrongdoing on either party's behalf. No signature, just an automated footer from the Municipal Services Department. Jamal read it twice, then set the phone down carefully like it might shatter. He'd known this was coming, known it the moment Thomas Whitfield's Mercedes blocked his truck, known it when the cameras came out, known it when the police report was filed. The system didn't need evidence, it just needed documentation. He stood slowly, walked to his bedroom. The apartment was small, one bedroom, kitchenette, bathroom, cheap rent in a neighborhood that asked no questions. He'd chosen it specifically for that quality, anonymity. Jamal knelt beside his bed and pulled out a locked metal file box. Army green, fireproof, the kind used for important documents, the kind used for evidence. He unlocked it with a key he kept on a chain around his neck. Never in a drawer, never out of reach. Inside, the files were organized with the same precision as his toolkit. Alphabetical tabs, color-coded folders, everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced. Case file, USA v. Whitfield et al., DOJ Civil Rights Division, case number 17, CR 8842. Beneath it, more folders. Witness statements, sealed federal correspondence, confidential investigative summary, restricted. Jamal pulled out a document dated 7 years ago, his own signature at the bottom, beneath a title that no longer existed. Special Investigator, Civil Rights Division, U.S. Department of Justice. He stared at it for a long moment. That investigation had cost him everything. His career, his reputation, nearly his life. He'd exposed a network of zoning officials using policy language to enforce racial segregation, forcing black homeowners out through selective code enforcement, predatory fines, and coordinated harassment. He'd built an airtight case, 50 witnesses, thousands of documents, pattern evidence spanning a decade. Then the administration changed. Priorities shifted. The case was quietly buried under resource constraints. And the officials he'd been investigating? Still in power, still protected, still men like Thomas Whitfield. Jamal pulled out another folder. Inside were recent photographs, his own, taken over the past 6 weeks. Thomas at city council meetings, Thomas at zoning board hearings, Thomas shaking hands with the mayor. All public record, all legal, all evidence. Beneath the photos, a handwritten list of names. Contractors who'd been pushed out, families who'd lost homes, people who'd filed complaints that disappeared into bureaucratic silence. Jamal had spent 6 weeks working invisible jobs, watching, documenting, building the foundation for something that couldn't be buried this time. He closed the file box slowly, returned it to its place under the bed, locked it, then sat back against the wall, staring at nothing. His voice, when he finally spoke, was barely a whisper. I hoped this city had changed. Outside, morning traffic picked up, people heading to work, to normal lives, to a world where systems functioned, where justice was real, where speaking truth didn't destroy you. Jamal pulled out his phone, scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in 7 years. His finger hovered over the name. Not yet. He needed more. Needed ironclad evidence. Needed something so overwhelming that even a changed administration couldn't ignore it. He put the phone away, stood up, got ready to return his municipal credentials. But first, he made copies of everything. Jamal spent 3 days doing nothing. That was the hardest part. He woke up, made coffee, sat at his kitchen table staring at job listings he didn't apply to. Watched the hours pass, went to bed, repeated. On the 4th day, he opened his laptop. The Maple Ridge Community Forum was public, unmoderated, and brutal. He scrolled to the thread titled, Suspicious Activity on Oakwood Drive. Stay vigilant. Thomas W. _chairman. Thanks to everyone who helped document last week's incident. This is exactly why community oversight matters. We can't let our standards slip. 43 replies, all supportive, all grateful for Thomas's leadership. Nobody mentioned Jamal's name. They didn't have to. Concerned mom too. I saw him. Didn't feel right. Thank God someone called it in. Jeff D., Oakwood. This is what happens when you don't vet contractors properly. Municipality needs better screening. Jamal closed the laptop. His phone buzzed. A text from Danny, his former coworker. Yo, man, heard what happened. That's messed up. You good? Jamal typed 3 different responses, deleted all of them, finally sent, I'm fine. Danny replied immediately, you should fight this. File a complaint or something. That's discrimination. Jamal stared at those words for a long time. Fight this. He'd heard that before. 7 years ago when he was the one telling witnesses to come forward, to trust the system, to believe that documentation and evidence would protect them. He remembered Marcus Chen, 52 years old, small business owner, perfect witness, articulate, credible, meticulous records of harassment by zoning officials. Marcus had testified, cooperated fully, put his name on official statements. 2 weeks later, his business was condemned. Structural violations. The building had passed inspection 3 months earlier. Marcus lost everything fighting that condemnation. The case was still pending when Jamal's investigation was shut down. Last Jamal heard, Marcus was working security at a mall 3 states away. Then there was Angela Rodriguez, single mother, documented 15 instances of selective code enforcement. She'd been brave, believed in the process. Her custody hearing suddenly had new evidence submitted by CPS. Anonymous complaints about her fitness as a parent. None substantiated, all perfectly legal to investigate. She got her kids back eventually, but the fear never left her voice. Jamal had promised them protection, had believed the federal shield meant something. It didn't. When the case collapsed, those witnesses were left exposed. Their names in documents, their complaints on record, their lives marked forever by the decision to speak up. And Jamal? He'd been reassigned. Lateral move, they called it, to a basement office reviewing cold cases nobody cared about. His security clearance suspended pending routine review. The review lasted 14 months. By the time it was cleared, his career was dead. He'd learned the lesson everyone eventually learns. The system protects itself first. Jamal looked at Danny's text again. "You should fight this." He typed slowly, "Not worth it. I'll find other work." Danny sent back a disappointed emoji. Jamal turned off his phone, walked to his window, looked out at the city that had chewed him up once already. Every instinct screamed at him to stay quiet, to disappear, to protect himself the way the system never would. He thought about his file box under the bed. 7 years of documentation, names, evidence, the foundation of something that could matter or could destroy him completely. Jamal closed the blinds, made his decision. Silence, at least for now. The first notice arrived on day 6. Violation, unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. Jamal's sedan, the one he'd been driving for 15 years, was now classified as a commercial vehicle because it had a toolbox in the trunk. His apartment complex didn't allow commercial vehicle parking. Fine, $250, payable within 10 days. He paid it, moved the toolbox to his apartment. Day 9, violation, excessive noise complaint. Someone reported loud music and disturbances from his unit at 2 a.m. on 3 separate occasions. Jamal didn't own a speaker, didn't play music, was asleep at 2 a.m. every night. Fine, $175. He filed a dispute. It was denied within 48 hours. Multiple corroborating reports. Day 12, his landlord called. "Mr. Carter, I'm getting pressure from the property management company. They're saying you're a liability issue." "I've done nothing wrong." "I know, I believe you, but the management company answers to investors, and the investors answer to the zoning board. You understand what I'm saying?" Jamal understood perfectly. "How long do I have?" "End of the month. I'm sorry." By week 3, Jamal had applied to 14 jobs, 3 interviews scheduled. All 3 canceled within hours of his background check authorization. No explanations, just automated emails. "We've decided to pursue other candidates." He tried a landscaping company outside the city limits. The owner seemed eager until Jamal mentioned his last address. "Maple Ridge area? Yeah, I can't touch that. Zoning board controls too many contracts out here. One bad word from them and I lose municipal bids." "I haven't done anything wrong." The owner looked uncomfortable. "I'm sure you haven't, but it doesn't matter, does it?" Week 4, Jamal noticed the car, gray Toyota Camry, different driver each time, but always the same car, parked across from his apartment, outside the grocery store, at the gas station. Not police, too obvious for that. Private security, the kind Thomas Whitfield's connections could afford. Jamal started documenting it, photos, times, license plate, added it to his files. But documentation didn't stop surveillance. Week 5, he got a call from the city's contractor licensing board. "Mr. Carter, we're conducting a routine audit of your business license." "I don't have a business license. I'm an individual contractor." "Our records show you've accepted payment for services. That requires a business license." "I worked for the municipality, W-2 employment. We have reports of side jobs, cash payments, unlicensed operation." Jamal's jaw tightened. "That's false. We'll need to investigate. Until then, you're barred from accepting any contract work in the county." They hung up before he could respond. Week 6, Jamal's bank account hit $347. Unemployment denied. Voluntary separation from municipal contract. Food stamps pending. Additional verification required. Every door closed. Every avenue blocked. Not through dramatic confrontation, but through paperwork, through policy, through the quiet machinery of bureaucracy turned into a weapon. Thomas Whitfield never called, never threatened, never had to. The system did it for him. Jamal sat in his apartment, soon-to-be former apartment, surrounded by violation notices, denial letters, and surveillance photos. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Jamal Carter? Yes. This is Rebecca Martinez. I'm an attorney with the ACLU. Someone forwarded me information about your situation. I'd like to talk. Jamal closed his eyes. Hope was dangerous. Hope got people killed, but he was already drowning. When? He asked. Rebecca Martinez was professional, sympathetic, and ultimately useless. She met Jamal at a coffee shop on neutral ground outside Maple Ridge jurisdiction, listened to everything, took notes, nodded in all the right places. This is textbook targeted harassment, she said, reviewing his documentation. Coordinated enforcement, pretextual violations, economic strangulation. We can file complaints with multiple agencies. Will it work? Rebecca hesitated. That hesitation told him everything. It's a process. These things take time. Time. The one thing Jamal didn't have. But he filed anyway. What choice did he have? Complaint to City Civil Rights Office. Filed Monday, 9 a.m. Response received Wednesday, 4 p.m. Dear Mr. Carter, thank you for bringing your concerns to our attention. We take all allegations seriously and will conduct a thorough review. Please allow 60 to 90 business days for investigation. Sincerely, Office of Civil Rights, Compliance. Jamal did the math. 90 business days was 4.5 months. His eviction was in 3 weeks. Complaint to State Fair Housing Commission, filed Thursday. Response received Monday. Your complaint has been received and assigned case number 2024 FH8847. An investigator will contact you within 45 days to schedule an initial interview. 45 days. Complaint to Department of Labor, Employment Discrimination, filed Tuesday. Response received same day, automated. This complaint has been forwarded to the appropriate regional office. Due to high case volume, please expect delays in processing. Every agency had the same message. We hear you. We care. Wait. Meanwhile, Thomas Whitfield wasn't waiting. Week 7. Jamal saw him on the local news. The segment was titled, Community Leaders Making a Difference. Thomas stood in front of a newly renovated playground, surrounded by smiling families. Strong communities require strong standards, he told the camera, that practice smile firmly in place. We can't be afraid to enforce the rules that keep everyone safe. Some people call that discrimination. I call it accountability. The reporter nodded along. You faced criticism for your enforcement policies. Of first, change always faces resistance, but I sleep well knowing I'm protecting families and property values. That's what real leadership looks like. No mention of Jamal, no mention of complaints, just a man in a nice suit talking about protecting neighborhoods. Week 8. Rebecca called with an update. The Civil Rights Office assigned an investigator. That's good, right? The investigator is Richard Paulson. Silence. You know that name? Rebecca asked. He sits on the Zoning Board Appeals panel. Thomas Whitfield appointed him. Jesus. Rebecca exhaled slowly. Okay, we'll file a conflict of interest motion. How long will that take? Another hesitation. Weeks, maybe months. Week 9. Jamal received his eviction notice. Official, legal, unstoppable. 30 days to vacate. He called Rebecca. Can they do this while complaints are pending? Yes, the complaints don't create an automatic stay. We'd need to file for an injunction, but that requires proving immediate, irreparable harm and likelihood of success. I'm about to be homeless. I know, but legally that's not considered irreparable because theoretically you can find other housing. Where? Every landlord in the county runs background checks through the same property management system, the one Whitfield's connections control. Rebecca had no answer. Week 10, Thomas appeared at a city council meeting. Jamal watched the live stream from his apartment. A resident asked about recent complaints of discriminatory enforcement. Thomas smiled. Patient, understanding. We welcome all complaints. Transparency is crucial. That's why we have multiple oversight mechanisms, all operating independently. If someone has legitimate concerns, those processes will vindicate them. He paused. But we also can't let frivolous allegations paralyze good governance. Some people use the complaint process as a weapon when they simply don't want to follow the rules. Applause from the audience. Jamal closed his laptop. The system wasn't pretending to listen. It was performing listening. For an audience that would never hold it accountable, Danny visited on day 3. It happened at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Jamal was carrying boxes to his car, packing for the move he couldn't afford to make, when 3 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing, no sirens. They wanted attention, not urgency. Neighbors emerged onto porches immediately, phones out, recording. Jamal Carter? Officer Mills approached, the same cop from the Oakwood incident. Yes. You're under arrest for criminal mischief and destruction of property. Jamal's stomach dropped. What property? The Oakwood Community Center. Security footage shows your vehicle there last night. Graffiti and broken windows discovered this morning. I wasn't there last night. I haven't been near Oakwood in weeks. You have the right to remain silent. Mills kept talking, but Jamal stopped hearing. He was watching the cameras, counting them. 7 phones, 2 professional cameras media, already here, already positioned. This wasn't an arrest. It was a performance. They cuffed him in front of everyone, walked him slowly to the cruiser, made sure every angle got captured. Mrs. Chen from his building stood on her balcony, shaking her head. The local news led with it at noon. Former municipal contractor arrested in vandalism case. The anchor's voice was professionally neutral, but the framing wasn't. Jamal Carter, 41, was arrested this morning following an investigation into property damage at the Oakwood Community Center. Carter was recently suspended from municipal contract work following community complaints about protocol violations. They showed his mugshot, then cut to footage of spray-painted obscenities on the community center walls. Broken glass, destruction that looked personal, hateful. Police say security footage places Carter's vehicle at the scene. The community center serves over 300 families weekly, including youth programs and senior services. Cut to Thomas Whitfield, interviewed on site, standing in front of the damaged building. He looked genuinely pained. That was the worst part, how authentic his concern appeared. This is heartbreaking, Thomas said, gesturing at the graffiti behind him. This center represents everything good about our community. To see it attacked like this, he paused, collecting himself. We gave this individual opportunities. We tried to work with him. But some people, when they face accountability, they lash out. Do you think this was targeted? The reporter asked. I can't speculate on motive, but I will say this. When you build something valuable, there will always be people who want to tear it down rather than participate constructively. Thomas looked directly at the camera. But we won't be intimidated. We'll repair this damage and continue serving our community with the same standards we've always maintained. Cut back to the studio. Carter is being held on $50,000 bail. His attorney could not be reached for comment. Because Jamal couldn't afford an attorney, the public defender assigned to him was 26 years old, overworked, and honest about his chances. The security footage is problematic, he said during their jail meeting. It shows a vehicle matching yours. Same make, model, color. It's not mine. Check the plates. Footage is too grainy, and they have a witness who ID'd you. Who? The defender checked his notes. Anonymous tip through the community watch system, but corroborated by the footage. This is a setup. I believe you, but believing you and proving it are different things. He closed his folder. Best I can do is plead this down. Criminal mischief, probation, restitution. You'd avoid jail time. I didn't do this. I know, but fighting it means trial, means months, Means you stay here until then because you can't make bail. The defender looked exhausted. The system isn't built for proving innocence. It's built for processing cases. That night, Jamal lay on a jail cot, staring at concrete ceiling. On the other side of those walls, Thomas Whitfield was probably having dinner, wine, conversation about protecting property values, while Jamal became exactly what Thomas always said he was, a problem that needed removing. The visiting room was cold, institutional bulletproof glass between them, phones on either side. Danny looked uncomfortable the moment he sat down. "Man, this is crazy," Danny said, not quite meeting Jamal's eyes. "I can't believe they arrested you." "I need your help." Jamal kept his voice steady. "That night they say I vandalized the community center? I was home. You called me, remember? Around 9 p.m. We talked for 20 minutes about the playoff game." Danny's face shifted. Recognition, then something else. Fear. "Yeah, I remember that. I need you to testify. Tell them we were on the phone. It's an alibi." Danny looked down at his hands. "The thing is, my phone records, they're kind of messy. I make a lot of calls for work, personal stuff. It'd be hard to prove exactly when." "Danny, yes or no?" Silence stretched between them. "I got a family, man." Danny's voice dropped. "A mortgage. My wife's pregnant. I can't get involved in something like this." "I'm not asking you to lie. Just tell the truth." "The truth is, I don't remember every phone call I make." Danny stood up. "I'm sorry, I really am, but I can't help you." He hung up the phone before Jamal could respond. Rebecca came the next day with worse news. Councilman Martinez, the one who initially raised concerns about Whitfield's enforcement patterns, he's withdrawing his support. "Why?" Rebecca pulled out her tablet, showed him an email. "He sent this morning. After further review and consultation with legal counsel, I must clarify that my previous statements regarding zoning enforcement were based on incomplete information. I have full confidence in Chairman Whitfield's leadership and the integrity of our oversight processes." Jamal read it twice. They got to him. "His construction company has 3 projects pending approval with the zoning board," Rebecca said quietly. "All suddenly flagged for additional review, so he chose his business over doing the right thing. He chose survival, same as everyone else." Rebecca closed her tablet. "I've reached out to 12 people willing to provide statements about similar harassment patterns. 8 have stopped returning my calls. 3 explicitly refused. 1 moved out of state. And the last one? Still considering, but honestly, I don't expect them to follow through." That night, Jamal's public defender returned with an update. "The maintenance supervisor from your old job? Guy named Patterson? What about him?" "He submitted a statement to the prosecution. Says you made threatening comments about the community center, about people who think they run this city." "That's a lie." "Maybe, but he's their witness now. Says you harbored resentment after your suspension. Talked about getting even." The defender rubbed his eyes. "This changes things. The plea offer is off the table. They're pushing for maximum sentencing. Patterson knows I didn't do this." "What Patterson knows and what Patterson will say are 2 different things." The defender leaned forward. "Look, I've seen this before. In cases like yours, high profile, community pressure people protect themselves. They're not being malicious, they're being human." "Being human means letting an innocent man go to prison?" "Being human means being afraid." The defender gathered his papers. "And right now, everyone's more afraid of Thomas Whitfield than they are of justice." After he left, Jamal sat alone in his cell. He thought about Marcus Chen, who'd trusted the system and lost his business. About Angela Rodriguez, who'd spoken truth and nearly lost her children. About every witness he'd ever convinced to come forward, promising them protection he couldn't deliver. He'd learned this lesson before. Fear doesn't just silence people, it turns them into accomplices. And in Thomas Whitfield's world, that was the whole point. Jamal made bail on day 8. Rebecca found a bond agency willing to work with minimal collateral. but it cost him everything: his car title, his remaining savings, and a promise of monthly payments he had no way to make. He walked out of jail into afternoon sunlight that felt alien after days of fluorescent cells. No one was there to pick him up. He called a rideshare to take him home, except home didn't exist anymore. His apartment building manager met him at the entrance, apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. Your lease was terminated due to criminal charges. Your belongings are in storage unit 247. You have 30 days to retrieve them before they're disposed of." I was arrested, not convicted. The lease agreement includes a morality clause. Arrest for property destruction qualifies as breach. The management company's decision is final. Jamal stood there, holding the plastic bag containing his wallet and keys to a car that was no longer his. Everything he owned was in a storage unit he couldn't access without paying fees he didn't have. He spent that night in a motel off the highway, $49. The cheapest he could find. Thin walls, stained carpet, the smell of cigarettes in desperation. He lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at water damage on the ceiling. His phone buzzed. Email notification. Your trial date has been set. 87 days from now. 87 days in limbo. 87 days of motels he couldn't afford. Job applications that would go nowhere. A legal system grinding him down one procedural delay at a time. He opened his banking app. Balance, $63.42. The motel was $49 per night. He had enough for one more day. Maybe two if he didn't eat. Jamal closed the app and opened his contact list. Scrolled through names of people who used to answer his calls. Friends from college, former colleagues, people who'd sworn they'd always have his back. He didn't call any of them. He already knew what silence sounded like. Instead, he pulled up news coverage of his arrest. The comments section was exactly what he expected. Truth Seeker 47. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Maple Ridge Mom. This is why we need stricter contractor screening. Glad Whitfield caught this before someone got hurt. Justice Warrior 22. Another thug thinking he's above the law. Lock him up. 347 comments, not one questioning the narrative. Jamal set his phone face down on the nightstand, thought about the file box still in storage. 7 years of documentation, evidence of systematic discrimination, names of victims, proof of corruption. What had it gotten him? Arrested, homeless, unemployable, alone. He thought about Marcus Chen, who'd lost his business believing justice would protect him. About Angela Rodriguez, who'd nearly lost her children trusting the system. About every witness who'd been crushed by the machinery they'd been told would save them. Jamal had spent his entire career believing in that machinery, believing documentation mattered, that evidence spoke louder than power, that truth had weight. 7 years ago, he'd learned the truth had no weight at all when the people holding the scales decided to ignore it. And now, lying in a motel room that cost more than he had, facing trial for a crime he didn't commit, destroyed by a system that processed him like defective merchandise, he wondered if he'd ever really believed in justice, or just in the comfortable lie that it existed. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Jamal almost ignored it, almost chose the silence that had kept him alive this long. But he was already at the bottom. Nothing left to lose. He answered. Jamal Carter? Yeah. This is District Attorney Ellen Whitmore. I need to speak with you about Thomas Whitfield. Off the record. Jamal sat up slowly. I'm listening. Ellen Whitmore wasn't what Jamal expected. She was young, early 30s, and blunt in a way that suggested she hadn't been ground down by the system yet. They met at a diner 40 miles outside the city, far from anyone who might recognize either of them. I've been reviewing your case, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. The evidence is thin, the witness statements contradictory, the security footage conveniently degraded. You think I'm innocent. I think you're being railroaded, but thinking it and proving it are different things. She pulled out a folder. What I can't figure out is why. Thomas Whitfield has gone scorched earth on you. That level of coordination, that many resources, it's personal. What did you do to him? Jamal was quiet for a long moment. I investigated him 7 years ago. Ellen's expression shifted. Investigated how? I was a federal civil rights investigator, DOJ. I built a case against Whitfield and 6 other officials for using zoning enforcement as racial segregation. Jesus, what happened to the case? Buried. Administration changed. Priorities shifted. Resource constraints. Jamal's voice was flat. The official story was that the evidence wasn't strong enough. The real story was that prosecuting sitting officials was politically inconvenient. Ellen leaned back, processing. And now you're back in his jurisdiction. I thought enough time had passed. Thought I could work quietly, rebuild my life. Jamal looked at his hands. I was wrong. Does Whitfield know who you are? Not at first, but he figured it out. Had to. This level of targeting doesn't happen randomly. Ellen was quiet, thinking. Then, the federal case, do you still have the files? Every page, every witness statement, every piece of evidence. How strong was it? Airtight, 53 documented cases of discriminatory enforcement, pattern evidence spanning 12 years. Financial records showing coordination between officials and property developers. It was bulletproof. Then why didn't... Ellen stopped herself. She knew why. Who was your supervisor? Who shut it down? Jamal told her the name. Ellen's face went pale. He's a federal judge now. I know. They sat in silence, the implications settling like sediment. Finally, Ellen spoke. I can't touch your criminal case. Conflict of interest, I'm county, and this has my office's fingerprints on it. But, she hesitated, if someone were to reopen that federal investigation with new evidence of ongoing violations, that would be a different jurisdiction entirely. The case is closed, has been for 7 years. Cases can be reopened, especially if new evidence suggests the original violations never stopped. Ellen met his eyes. You'd need someone with authority to request it, someone current DOJ would listen to. Jamal understood what she was saying. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to a contact he'd saved but never called. A name from another life. Patricia Chen, Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Civil Rights Division. Marcus Chen's sister. The one family member who'd escaped the fallout of Jamal's failed investigation by being 3,000 miles away in Washington. The one person who might remember what justice was supposed to look like. Jamal stared at the number for 30 seconds, then hit call. It rang 4 times. He almost hung up. This is Patricia Chen. Jamal's throat tightened. Ms. Chen, this is Jamal Carter. I don't know if you remember me. I remember you, Mr. Carter. Her voice was careful, professional. You investigated the case that destroyed my brother's business. Yes, ma'am. Why are you calling me? Jamal closed his eyes. Because Thomas Whitfield is still doing it, and this time I have proof. Silence on the line. Then, tell me everything. Patricia Chen didn't make promises. She listened to Jamal's account for 47 minutes without interrupting, asked precise questions, took notes, then said, I'll review what you have. If it's as strong as you say, I'll bring it to the Civil Rights Division Director. No guarantees. That was 3 weeks ago. Jamal heard nothing. No calls, no emails, no updates. He survived on day labor jobs, cash under the table, the kind that didn't check backgrounds. Moved between motels in his car. Ate once a day. Watched his trial date approach like a slow-motion execution. He started to think Patricia had dismissed him. Another black man with a grievance. Another story the system would ignore. Then things started happening. Small things. Quiet things. Thomas Whitfield's assistant mentioned it first, on the community forum. Has anyone else gotten records requests from federal offices? We got 3 in 1 week, Seems excessive. Someone else replied, yes, DOJ asking for zoning enforcement data going back 10 years. They said it's routine compliance review, but the scope is huge. Jamal read those posts from a library computer, his heart beating faster. Week 2 of silence. A municipal employee posted, "Weird day at work. FBI agents showed up asking about contractor licensing procedures. Very specific questions about how complaints are processed." Then, anyone know why the city attorney's office is suddenly auditing the zoning board's enforcement records? The post got nervous, defensive. This is probably just standard procedure, nothing to worry about. But Thomas Whitfield wasn't posting anymore. Week 3, Jamal saw it on the local news. Brief mention, buried in the evening roundup. Federal investigators are conducting what they call a routine review of municipal zoning practices across several counties. Officials say this is part of standard compliance monitoring. The anchor moved on quickly. But Jamal noticed what wasn't said. Which counties? Which officials? What triggered the review? Week 4, Rebecca called, confused. Something strange is happening with your case. The prosecution requested a continuance, 60 days. Why? They wouldn't say, just that new information requires additional review. She paused. Jamal, did you do something? I made a phone call. To who? Someone who remembers what justice looks like. Thomas Whitfield felt it too. He sat in his office, door closed, reviewing the subpoena that had arrived that morning via certified mail. United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. You are hereby required to produce all documents related to zoning enforcement actions from January 2017 to present, including but not limited to complaint records, investigation files, enforcement decisions, communications with property owners, financial records. The list went on for 3 pages. Thomas picked up his phone, called his attorney. Marcus, I need you to look at something. Let me guess. DOJ subpoena. You got one too? Everyone on the board got one. Patterson from Municipal Services, the property management companies, even some of the private contractors. Marcus's voice was tense. Thomas, this isn't routine. This is a pattern investigation. For what? Civil rights violations, discriminatory enforcement, the kind of thing that ends careers and starts criminal cases. Thomas felt ice in his stomach. How long have they been investigating? Hard to say. These things move slow until they don't. But based on the scope of requests, months, maybe longer. Thomas thought about Jamal Carter, the man he'd systematically destroyed, the man sitting in a motel somewhere, awaiting trial. Marcus, that contractor I had arrested, the vandalism case, what's his background? Why does it matter? Just check. 5 minutes later, Marcus called back. Thomas, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Jamal Carter, former DOJ investigator, Civil Rights Division, specialized in, Marcus's voice dropped, specialized in discriminatory zoning enforcement. Thomas's office suddenly felt very small. When did he work for DOJ? 2015 to 2018. Based here, actually. Led an investigation into... Marcus stopped. Oh no. Into what? Into you. The phone almost slipped from Thomas's hand. The case was closed, he said, but his voice wavered. Closed isn't the same as gone. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Thomas, if he kept evidence, if he's been documenting current activity, if DOJ is reopening that investigation with 7 years of additional violations, how bad? Career ending, asset forfeiting, prison time bad. Thomas hung up, sat in silence, thought about every complaint he'd filed, every fine he'd issued, every contractor he'd buried, all documented, all federal now, all too late to undo. The courtroom was packed. Thomas Whitfield sat in the front row, perfectly composed in a tailored Navy suit. His attorney, Marcus Chen, no relation, sat beside him, expensive briefcase open, confident. Behind them, supporters filled the gallery, zoning board members, concerned citizens, local press. They'd come to watch justice being served. Jamal entered through the side door, escorted by a bailiff. He wore the same clothes he'd been arrested in, cleaned, but worn. No family, no supporters. Just his overworked public defender, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The contrast was deliberate, intentional. Thomas made sure everyone could see it. All rise. The Honorable Judge Catherine Reynolds presiding. Judge Reynolds was 62, a former prosecutor known for no-nonsense efficiency. She'd seen every trick, every angle. Nothing surprised her anymore. Be seated. She reviewed the case file briefly. People versus Carter. Criminal mischief and destruction of property. Mr. Patterson, is the state ready to proceed? The prosecutor stood. Yes, Your Honor. The state has clear evidence linking the defendant to. Your Honor, Jamal's public defender interrupted, standing awkwardly. Before we proceed, I need to inform the court that there's been a development. Reynolds looked up. What kind of development? I'm no longer Mr. Carter's attorney of record. The courtroom murmured. Thomas leaned forward, confused. As of when? Reynolds asked. As of this morning. Mr. Carter has retained private counsel. Who? The rear courtroom doors opened. A woman in a sharp gray suit entered, followed by two men carrying document boxes. She walked with the kind of confidence that comes from federal authority and unlimited resources. Patricia Chen, Your Honor, Deputy Assistant Attorney General, Civil Rights Division, United States Department of Justice. I'm here representing Mr. Carter in conjunction with ongoing federal proceedings. The courtroom exploded in whispers. Thomas's face went pale. Judge Reynolds banged her gavel. Order! Ms. Chen, this is a state criminal matter. The federal government doesn't have jurisdiction. Actually, Your Honor, we do. Patricia approached the bench, handing papers to both the judge and prosecutor. These charges against Mr. Carter are directly related to a federal civil rights investigation. We're invoking removal to federal court under 28 U.S.C. Section 1442. Patterson, the prosecutor, frantically scanned the documents. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. It's also entirely legal, Reynolds said, reading. She looked at Patricia. You're claiming these state charges are retaliatory in nature? We're claiming these charges are part of a coordinated effort to intimidate a federal witness and obstruct an ongoing investigation. Mr. Carter has been cooperating with the Department of Justice for 6 weeks. During that time, he's been subjected to systematic harassment, culminating in false arrest. Thomas stood abruptly. This is absurd. Mr. Whitfield, sit down, Reynolds ordered. Patricia continued. We have evidence that the security footage used to charge Mr. Carter was manipulated, that the anonymous witness doesn't exist, that this entire prosecution is fabricated. She gestured to Jamal. We also have evidence that Mr. Carter was, at the time of the alleged crime, on a recorded conference call with federal investigators. Your Honor, Patterson tried, we were never provided because you never asked, Patricia cut in. You assumed guilt and prosecuted accordingly. Reynolds was quiet, reading through the removal motion. Finally, the federal government's motion for removal is granted. This case is transferred to federal jurisdiction pending resolution of related investigations. She looked at Jamal. Mr. Carter, you're released on your own recognizance. All bail conditions lifted. Your Honor, Patterson protested, I've made my ruling. Reynolds turned to Patricia. But before we adjourn, I want to hear from Mr. Carter directly. Sir, do you have anything to say to this court? Jamal stood slowly. The entire room waited. Jamal stood at the defense table, hands steady for the first time in months. He didn't look at Thomas Whitfield. Not yet. Your Honor, he began, his voice quiet but clear. My name is Jamal Marcus Carter. For the record, I want to state my full background. The courtroom was completely silent. From 2015 to 2018, I served as a special investigator with the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. My specialization was enforcement abuse, specifically the use of zoning regulations, municipal codes, and property oversight as tools of racial discrimination. Thomas's attorney gripped his arm, whispered urgently. Thomas shook his head, frozen. During that time, Jamal continued, I led an investigation in this city, case number 17CR8842. The investigation documented a coordinated pattern of discriminatory enforcement targeting Black homeowners and contractors. 53 verified incidents, 12 officials involved. Financial records showing kickbacks between zoning board members and developers who profited from forced sales. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, completely focused now. The case took 3 years to build. Every regulation followed, every witness protected, every piece of evidence documented according to federal standards. Jamal's voice didn't waver. The case was closed in 2018 when the administration changed priorities. I was reassigned. Eventually, I left the DOJ entirely. He paused, finally looking at Thomas. But I kept the files. The courtroom erupted. Reynolds banged her gavel repeatedly. I returned to this city 6 months ago under an assumed work profile. I took maintenance jobs, low visibility positions that gave me access to municipal records, zoning board meetings, and enforcement patterns. Jamal pulled a small notebook from his pocket. I documented everything. Every complaint filed, every fine issued, every contractor forced out, every family displaced. Patricia Chen stood. Your Honor, Mr. Carter has been operating as a confidential informant for the past 6 weeks. Everything he collected has been provided to federal investigators. And what did you find, Mr. Carter? Reynolds asked. That nothing changed, Your Honor. The same patterns, the same officials, the same victims, just different names. He looked at Thomas directly now. Thomas Whitfield has personally filed 47 enforcement complaints in the past year. 43 targeted Black or Latino contractors and homeowners. The 4 white individuals targeted had filed discrimination complaints against the zoning board. Thomas stood, face red. This is a witch hunt. Sit down. Reynolds' voice was steel. Patricia stepped forward. Your Honor, the federal investigation has expanded significantly. We're now examining not just historical violations, but ongoing criminal activity, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and the false prosecution of Mr. Carter himself. She opened one of the document boxes, pulled out a thick file. This morning, a federal grand jury issued indictments against 7 individuals, including Thomas Whitfield, for civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, conspiracy under Section 241, and obstruction of justice. She handed the documents to the bailiff. Federal marshals are currently executing arrest warrants. The courtroom exploded again. Thomas's attorney was on his feet. Your Honor, we haven't been notified. Because you're part of the investigation, Counselor, Patricia said calmly. Your communications with Mr. Whitfield regarding the Carter prosecution are evidence of conspiracy. Marcus Chen's face went white. Reynolds banged her gavel until order returned. Mr. Whitfield, do you have anything to say? Thomas looked at Jamal. Really looked at him. The maintenance worker. The nobody. The man he'd systematically destroyed. The federal investigator who'd been watching him the entire time. I want my attorney, Thomas whispered. Your attorney is being questioned by federal agents, Patricia said, but you're welcome to request new counsel. 2 federal marshals entered through the rear doors. Thomas Whitfield, chairman of the Zoning and Property Oversight Board, respected community leader, protector of neighborhood standards, started to shake. The marshals approached Thomas Whitfield with practiced efficiency. Mr. Whitfield, you're under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. The lead marshal produced handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent." "Wait," Thomas's voice cracked. He looked at Judge Reynolds desperately. "Your Honor, this is not— I've served this community for 15 years. I've never—" Patricia Chen opened another file. Financial records show Thomas Whitfield received $847,000 in consulting fees from Redstone Development over the past 6 years. She placed bank statements on the prosecutor's table. Redstone purchased 19 properties in Maple Ridge, all from Black homeowners who were forced to sell after zoning violations made their properties uninhabitable. She laid out more documents one by one. Text messages between Whitfield and zoning board members coordinating which contractors to target. Emails discussing how to clean up neighborhoods through selective enforcement. Recorded calls with property management companies offering bounties for finding violations in specific zip codes. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the evidence mounted. Witness intimidation, 18 documented cases of people who filed complaints suddenly facing audits, license suspensions, or employment difficulties, including Danny Morrison, who was threatened with contractor license revocation after initially agreeing to provide an alibi for Mr. Carter. Thomas slumped in his chair. "And the vandalism?" Reynolds asked. "Security footage was edited. We recovered the original from the cloud backup." Patricia pulled out a tablet, showed the timestamp discrepancies. The actual vandal was a juvenile hired by Richard Paulson, another board member, specifically to frame Mr. Carter. The juvenile has provided a full statement in exchange for immunity. Patterson, the prosecutor, looked sick. "Your Honor, I was never informed." "Because Mr. Patterson wasn't part of the conspiracy," Patricia said. "He was just doing his job with false evidence. The real architect was Whitfield, who used his connections to ensure the case moved quickly before anyone could examine it too closely." The marshals pulled Thomas to his feet. He looked at Jamal one last time. "I was protecting this community, keeping standards. That's not a crime." Jamal met his eyes, his voice quiet but clear. "You weren't protecting anyone. You were protecting property values, and you destroyed lives to do it." Thomas opened his mouth, closed it, nothing left to say. The marshals led him out in handcuffs. The chairman, who'd sworn to serve for years to come, who'd promised to protect what they'd built, who'd mocked legal processes as obstacles for troublemakers, gone in less than 5 minutes. The same amount of time it took to arrest Jamal on false charges. 3. Final resolution and moral. 6 months later, Jamal stood in front of a modest storefront on the east side of the city. The sign above the door read, "Carter Legal Aid Services, free consultation." Inside, 3 attorneys worked at donated desks. Case files lined the walls, dozens of families fighting discriminatory enforcement, contractors seeking license reinstatement, homeowners contesting forced sales. All the people Thomas Whitfield had buried, all the people Jamal was helping unbury. Rebecca Martinez entered, carrying coffee. The Morrison case settled. Danny got his contractor license back, full back pay, and a written apology from the licensing board. "Good," Jamal reviewed another file. "What about the Chen property?" "Still in appeals, but we're winning. The condemnation was completely fraudulent." Rebecca sat down. "You know, the mayor's office called again. They want to appoint you to the new oversight commission. 6-figure salary, full authority to reform zoning enforcement." Jamal didn't look up from his work. "What did you tell them?" "That you'd think about it." "Tell them no." "Jamal, I spent 3 years in power before, had authority, resources, federal backing." He finally looked at her. "And when priorities shifted, all that power disappeared. The witnesses I promised to protect got destroyed anyway. This is different." "Maybe." He gestured at the files surrounding them. "But this is permanent. No elections can shut it down. No administration can defund it. Just people helping people, one case at a time." Rebecca smiled. You're stubborn. I'm careful. The door opened. A young black woman entered, nervous, carrying a folder of zoning violation notices. Jamal stood, extending his hand. Welcome. How can we help? She explained her situation, fines for violations she'd already fixed, deadlines that kept changing, a property management company pressuring her to sell. Jamal listened, took notes, asked precise questions. When she finished, he said simply, "We'll take your case, no charge." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." After she left, Rebecca asked, "Think we can win?" "Documentation solid. Patterns clear. Yeah, we'll win." Jamal returned to his desk. They always forget that part. What part? That the law is quiet. He opened another case file. But it remembers everything. Outside, the city continued its rhythm. Traffic, commerce, life. Thomas Whitfield sat in a federal facility awaiting trial. 6 co-conspirators had already pleaded guilty. His attorney, the one who hadn't been indicted, was negotiating a plea deal that would still put him away for years. The zoning board had been dissolved and rebuilt from scratch. 47 families had cases reopened. And in a modest storefront, a man who'd lost everything kept working. Not for power, not for revenge, but for the one thing that had survived when everything else collapsed. Justice. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that builds cases brick by brick. The kind that remembers.